And now, let's get pop conscious.
Well, hello. Let's get pop conscious on this post-Oscar Monday. I am Stacy Macris Ross, and my compadre is actually on another continent. Hello, Malayna.
Hello. I am calling you from Sri Lanka, or broadcasting from Sri Lanka, or whatever it is I'm doing. It's 1:30 in the morning. I'm a little discombobulated.
Very good. And we have a special guest.
Woo!
Yes, our special guest today is none other than our very own Academy Award Oscar historian, my husband, Juan Ros.
Hello.
Yay!
Thank you for having me, everybody.
So my husband, Juan, actually graduated from Penn State in 1988 with a degree in film, and then went on to work on quite a few movies in his day. Is this correct? JFK, Cape Fear. What other ones?
Yes, the Godfather Part 3. There's a movie called Scenes from a Mall with Woody Allen and Bette Midler. That was kind of a flop, but it was fun. In fact, most of the movies I worked on were flops, but they were inevitably fun in one way or another.
Very good. So he's going to help us because he has this great ability to be able to name any Oscar winner, Best Picture winner from 1965 to present day.
Yeah.
So
I'm a little rusty. I don't know. I'm rusty.
This is his talent. It's not
much of a talent.
When we go out, I tell people this, and it becomes the entertainment for the evening. So it'll become entertainment for our show.
Yeah, totally. Well, I have a list here of the Best Picture and Best Animated Features from forever, so I can quiz Juan on that.
Very good, because we'll need somebody to check him, because we only have one iPad here. We don't want him to have the answers in front of him. So if you have the answers, we're good to go.
Yeah,
so
I do.
Last night was Oscars. Were you able to watch it from across the sea?
I think it was probably on, but I didn't see it. So I'm getting all my news from the internet, and that's all I got. So you are my conduit, and maybe you're the conduit for other people who didn't watch the Oscars as well.
Well, being here in Southern California, especially Los Angeles area, the Oscars are huge. In fact, I always like the Monday after the Oscars because there's no traffic.
Yes, and that wasn't the case when the Oscars were actually on Mondays, but you might recall that they moved them to Sundays probably, I don't know, I want to say maybe 10 years ago or so, to get more ratings, and it's a lot more fun now on Sundays because now people can stay up late. I remember as a kid watching the Oscars, and it was on a Monday night, and it was stinky and I lived on the East Coast. So on the East Coast, it didn't start until 8:30, didn't end until like 11:30 at night, depending on how long the broadcast was. And most of the time, until I got older, like into my teenage years, I never got to see the Best Picture actually announced. So it's much nicer now living on this coast, where it's live in the middle of the afternoon and also on a Sunday. Makes it a lot of fun to have parties too.
That's much less stinky.
That's right. That's right. And Ellen did a funny little thing at the beginning of the show because she said, we've been having rain here, so yes, keep praying for us.
Yes, thank you for your prayers.
And thank you for your prayers. Yes, which is true, because as my husband knows, I'm not one for rain. So I appreciate all the prayers for our rain-soaked days that we've been having.
We enjoy the rain. We appreciate the rain, and we're grateful for the rain.
I really do try to be appreciative and grateful for the rain,
because it's so infrequent here in Southern California.
Well, and I know that, and we're in the middle of a drought, but I'm thinking maybe it's like Noah, because I'm sure when Noah was told there was going to be 40 days of rain, his thought was probably like, oh man, bummer. But then he built himself an ark.
He did.
Hunkered down for 40 days, 40 nights.
And we'll soon find the whole story in the new feature film Noah, starring Ridley Scott.
I know. It's going to be an Oscar winner, I think.
For next year.
So we'll be back.
There we go. We're planting the seed now.
That's right.
Making it happen.
Yeah. So the big movies there was really two that were kind of dominant last night, would you say, Juan?
Yes. It was definitely between 12 Years a Slave and Gravity. They were seen as the front runners going into the Academy Awards. And it turned out to be pretty much what a lot of prognosticators said would be, that Gravity would sweep the technical awards, which it did. It won 7 awards, including Best Director. But that 12 Years a Slave only won 3 awards total, which is probably one of the lowest totals for a Best Picture winner, but did actually win the big prize, Best Picture. So
really, one of the lowest?
Well, it only won 3 awards total. So you think of Best Picture winners.
Oh, and usually they win a lot more.
Yeah, they win a lot more.
I think the lowest would be 0.
For a Best Picture winner,
yeah,
you have to have at least 1. So the lowest could only, in theory, be 1. And I don't know that any Best Picture winner has only won 1 award. I'd have to do that research, but
so 3 is low.
3 is pretty low for a Best Picture winner.
So here's what. So the 12 Years a Slave is a real story. It's based on the real memoirs.
That's right.
Solomon
Northrop.
Oh, Solomon. Sorry, with an S.
Yeah.
Both Bible names, right? So Solomon
Northrop. This was a project that was long in development. Brad Pitt actually took it on. He was a producer of the movie and won an Oscar as a producer of the movie. As in case you didn't know, the Best Picture Oscars go to the producers of the movie, one or more producers, and Brad Pitt was one of those. So he took this story on. I don't know how he found out about it, but it's a true story of a free man who then got sold into slavery. He lived in the North, sold into slavery in the South, lived on a plantation, and then it's the story of his journey back to freedom. It's supposed to be very harrowing. I'll admit that I have not seen it yet, but nevertheless, it is a Best Picture winner, and we all involved should be congratulated. It's a very harrowing story.
I think anybody who's seen it should be congratulated too. Let's all and people who haven't seen it, let's congratulate us all. Let's all play.
Yes,
let's all win.
Winners. I think I listened to that last night too. We're all winners.
We're all winners,
good.
Except the ones that haven't won. she made
there
a joke.
You go. Well, I haven't seen it either, which really confounds and annoys me a little because my brother is one of the privileged people who get screener copies of the films that are being nominated or want to be nominated, I suppose. And 12 Years a Slave is one that he loaned to my father and didn't get back for me to see it. So I have not seen it, but I have seen Gravity, and I was really impressed by it. And I think I'm not alone in that, apparently.
Right. And so what was it, do you think? Because both of these seem to have really, and again, I haven't seen either one, but just the synopsis and the previews that I've seen, the little scenes that they showed last night included, both of these are really deep human stories. So do you think it's that spiritual element of both? And what are the spiritual messages maybe of both, do you think? What do you think, Juan?
Well, I'm sorry. You were asking Juan.
and then I'll go to you in Sri Lanka. I thought, there was a delay across the ocean, maybe. I'd give you some time.
There's probably. Okay.
With regards to Gravity, which I did see, Gravity is a story about survival. It takes place in space. It has a lot, from a technological standpoint, filmmaking standpoint, it's remarkable. They invented some new lighting and camera techniques just to make it appear that the actors were actually in space. I mean, visually, it's unbelievable. But then it actually has an extra element. If it were just that, it probably wouldn't be as great a movie. But it has the element of the human emotion. Sandra Bullock plays she's an astronaut. She's actually not an astronaut in the movie. It's not her career. She's a doctor who happens to be in space, just like some other civilians have gone into space before. But they encounter trouble in space, and she has to survive. And through the course of the story, you learn a little bit more about her story, her life back home, and the power of her performance is that you just feel she's desperate, and she does some remarkable things in order to try and get herself back home. I won't spoil the ending, but needless to say that there's a very powerful emotional climax, and it's sort of the human spirit and our will to survive at all costs sometimes in the worst situations. And 12 Years a Slave actually has a very similar theme because it's about Solomon Northrop also wanting to survive. In fact, he says there's a line in the movie that was featured in the clip during the Oscars where Solomon says something like, I don't want to survive. I want to live.
Ooh, I like that.
That is good. Yeah.
Good.
So similar, very different, obviously, locations and storytelling styles. But if you drill it down into that element of human survival, that's what actually both of those movies are about.
So isn't that interesting right now that in this time in history that's what's resonating with people, right? What do you think, Malayna?
Yeah, I think those two especially are very human stories that people can relate to no matter what their circumstance. It's the hero's journey. It's and with Gravity, there's almost nothing but looking at her facial expressions and reading her body language because it's just her kind of floating in space and there's stuff happening, but it's not as much as an impact as her facial expressions and everything. But I think a lot of the movies, I saw a lot of the rest of the screeners that my brother got, and I found them all kind of disheartening. And I felt like the stories that are being told right now are kind of reflecting people's feeling lost in the world, like maybe the change in economy, the change in the world lately these days. I mean, I'm feeling a huge energetic shift in my life, and I see it in the lives of my friends and people around me. I think it's making people feel really lost because the things that they counted on aren't there to count on anymore, that they have to come up with something new. So
that sounds like what Gravity is all about, being lost in space, if you will. And a lot of us, I think, are maybe a lot of people right now are feeling lost in space in their own life because they don't have that foundation that was holding them securely in place, right? Would you say that's true? Mm-hmm. Now, I should also mention that Juan he moved into a different career, which is financial planner. So he's a certified financial planner working with individuals and families, guiding them in their financial decisions. So it's interesting that this comes along, this theme. So do you see that with how our financial world has kind of moved and economies of families has changed, and now we have all these movies that, like Malayna said, seem to be about survival?
Well, I think if you go even peel the onion another layer, it's really boils down to fear. Because especially that's what I find in advising families and individuals on their money is a lot of it is fear-based. Fear of not having enough money as people get closer to retirement or they're actually in retirement. If you think about it, someone who's saved their whole life for retirement and then they actually get into retirement, it's very difficult for them to switch from being that saver mentality to now spending. Because it's like, well, what's the point of all that saving your whole life? Now you're in retirement. Now you can spend it. Well, it's not so easy. They have to make a shift mentally to say, okay, they have to allow themselves permission to now spend this money. But most of the time what we do with retired clients is we have to almost not force them to spend, but really admonish them at our meetings and say, you're not spending enough on yourself. This was what
That's
it was.
the kind of financial planner I want.
This was what it was. This is what all that saving was all about. Go on trips, do that sort of thing. So it becomes very much about getting over that fear of not having enough.
So isn't that interesting? Because then there was a few movies that were also nominated in different categories. I'm thinking of Blue Jasmine, which was about a woman whose husband was in that financial market, and then he did some criminal activities that then they lost it all.
Yep.
And then I'm thinking of
Dallas Buyers Club. And American Hustle.
Yeah, American Hustle, I'm thinking of.
And Wolf of Wall Street.
And Wolf of Wall Street, right.
There you go.
Again, these themes of people not feeling secure financially, and so it then coming into our movies, right?
And the best animated feature was Frozen, and that's also about being frozen in fear and coming out of it. So sensing a theme.
Frozen is very it's fear of one's own power, which is something
good one,
that,
good one, Juan. That's why we have you here today.
That's why I'm here to interpret the Oscars.
So what would you say what were the nominations for Best Picture, and which one would you say has the most unity message?
Well, the nominees were, we've already mentioned 12 Years a Slave and Gravity, and we've mentioned American Hustle. There's also Captain Phillips.
Oh my gosh, another
survival story. That's right. Dallas Buyers Club, another survival story about a man who contracts AIDS in the 80s, and he has to go into Mexico and bring in these drugs that weren't FDA approved for treatment. It was very takes place in the very early days of the AIDS crisis. So another survival story. Gravity. A movie called Her, H-E-R, Her, which is a semi-futuristic story about a man who falls in love with a computer operating system voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And that, we can talk about, spiritual meaning there about sort of being alone and trying to find some intimacy and some connection and not being able to find it with another human being, but with an artificial thing. Then there was Nebraska, which is a movie about an older man who thinks he's won $1 million and goes on this quest, and he takes his son along to Nebraska to claim his $1 million. And that's kind of a story about someone at the end of their life, much like the next nominee, Philomena, which is a story about an older woman who gave up a son for adoption when she was very, very young, and then teams up with a journalist to try and find her missing child and what happened. And then Wolf of Wall Street is the 9th nominated film. So we've got a lot of great movies, and I would say, so what was your original question?
So my question was, so thanks for the synopsis, because maybe not everyone knew about those movies, or, again, like Malayna is on the other side of the world and didn't get to see the Oscars. But so which one would you say? But now it almost sounds like they all have a unique message. They all do, right? So
right.
What would you...
that what metaphysical interpretation is about, is that every story is our story, whether it's in the Bible or whether it's told as a myth or whether it's a movie or a television show. Every story is our story. Every story is our hero's journey. I like the face you're making at me, Stace. I like that. I'm sorry you're all missing it.
Well, because that was one of my questions. How are movies like the Bible? And I think you've both hit it right on the nail on the head there, my friends, that those stories are our stories.
Every movie will resonate with an audience. Hopefully, obviously the better ones will, and everyone will take from it whatever meaning that they were able to extract from it, and that's the power of storytelling and movie making.
And so, one movie that they highlighted last night was The Wizard of Oz, because it's now been out for 75 years. And again, 75 years, how many generations? It stood the test of time. So, what is it, do you think, Juan, about that movie in particular that resonates with people? Because I think something like that over that long time is something on a spiritual level that it's resonating. Right?
Dare I say the hero's journey?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
well,
and also The Great Gatsby is a story that it was one of the nominated pictures and one of the winners, and that's also a tale that has stood the test of time, and a hero's journey.
This is true. The Wizard of Oz is a girl finding about herself, that she has courage and she has wisdom and she has bravery. And so therefore it appeals to everybody because we all want those things.
That's right. So it looks like we've already, come to the end of our first segment here.
It's sad but true, but we have 2 more segments to go, so it's not too sad.
Right. No.
Yeah, and everybody listening can hear all of our previous shows in our archives. So we are Pop Conscious, and we will be right back.
Well, welcome back to Pop Conscious. This is Stacy Macris Ross, my friend Malayna Dawn over in the other continent.
Island Tree.
Yeah, the Island Tree. And then my husband is our guest today, and that is Mr. Juan Ros.
Hello.
Has a degree in film, worked in the industry, is now a certified financial planner. And look, we worked that in somehow.
That's fabulous.
That was pretty funny. I didn't think that was not an intention there. But look, life is all about connections, right?
I made that connection looking at Juan's IMDb also, because the most recent credit he has is Rugrats as an assistant production accountant. And accounting assistant. So I thought, there is a segue into his new financial planning life.
This is true. I feel I am one of the few financial planners, if perhaps the only one, with his own IMDb page full of credits.
So we're talking about the Oscars last night, which is a big deal here in the Los Angeles area, as we broadcast out of Thousand Oaks, California, which is just about 45 minutes from downtown LA, would you say? Half hour, 45 minutes? Depends actually on the time of day. It could be 3 hours or 4 hours. Or if they shut the 405, it could be days and weeks.
Indeed. One could be lost forever.
Living only on Hawaiian rolls and cans of 7-Up.
That actually happened.
To Stacy and I. Not off the 405.
So I have a very important question for you. So every year,
I'm afraid of this.
We have a little party, an Oscar party. My parents come over, and now our 2 sons are part of this as well. And we all have our ballots. So before the Oscars start, we all mark our ballots at predicting what we think is going to win. And then, someone at the end of the evening is the winner, meaning, they've guessed the most correct.
Okay, I just lost Stacy. I can't hear you, Stace.
Wow, really?
No, We have our engineer. Now I hear you.
Okay, so here I am.
Sounds like our engineers are on the case.
Oh,
so you mark your ballots, and
so we mark our ballots. Mm-hmm. Yes, we mark our ballots, and we try to see who's going to guess the most correct answers. And so my question for Juan is, how did our 13-year-old son beat you on our Oscar ballot party?
Well, usually with the strategy with the Oscar balloting is to correctly guess the categories that no one has any idea about, meaning the documentary short, the animated short, these arcane categories that usually are the ones that will spell the winner versus loser in any Oscar pool. And he just he outvoted me. What can I say?
He outguessed you.
He analyzed Entertainment Weekly and the Wall Street Journal and all these publications that say who should win, who will win, and he picked some pretty good ones.
I'm just saying our 13-year-old son he's giving you a run for your money now.
He is. He wants to go into film, and we support him in that. And I'm excited that he likes watching the Oscars. It was a big thing for me when I was a kid.
So what was it like being a small...
What?
A small Cuban boy from Miami watching? Because I'm just thinking for us, it's exciting and we're into it because this is the entertainment industry. When we talk about industry, this is the industry we're talking about here in our neck of the woods. But for anyone else across the country and listening right now, I mean, it's pretty cool, right? I mean, so what was it like growing up in Miami?
It was
being also like our son, a 13-year-old who was into movies. Well,
for me, it was a big night. I remember I probably watched my first one in '77, the year that Rocky won. I remember.
I was just going to ask you that.
And by the way,
remember who won?
When we talk about years, you have to differentiate the year that the film came out versus the year of the broadcast because people sometimes confuse those. So Rocky won Best Picture in 1976 as the Best Picture for that year.
I just double-checked that fact.
At least 77, yes. So in any event, no, for me, it was great. My father loved movies. He came over from Cuba, and he was a big fan of Jimmy Stewart, and my grandfather liked John Wayne, and they would take us to the movies. I remember I saw the movie Jaws in the theater. That came out in 75, so I was 7 years old.
Gosh. Wow.
And, a little scared of the water after that, but I got over it.
I wouldn't go into pools after that, which really, since it took place in an ocean, doesn't make sense. But since we are so close to oceans,
yes,
I just thought that maybe a shark could, swim up into a swimming pool.
It's possible, I guess.
I don't think you were alone in that. I've heard a lot of people say that they were afraid of swimming in the pool after seeing Jaws. Like any bodies of water, taking baths after seeing Jaws seemed dangerous.
Yes.
And as
power of storytelling.
Yes,
exactly.
Well, and getting something in your head, is it a real fear or not? Ooh, There we go, folks. Yeah.
And then as the years went on, I just enjoyed watching it with my family. And you root for, when you're that age, you root for, like when Star Wars was nominated in 1977, you root for Star Wars to win Best Picture. It won a lot of technical awards, but Annie Hall won out. And I said, Annie Hall, what is that? Of course, now I've seen Annie Hall many times. It's a wonderful movie, one of Woody Allen's best. So, you go through these kinds of things. I remember in 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark was nominated. And I saw that movie. I saw Reds, which was also nominated that year. I loved Reds. I mean, what 12-year-old kid goes to see Reds, which is a 3-hour movie about communism? I mean, this is crazy. But
I think it would be the kind of 12-year-old boy who carries a briefcase to school, which is what I heard about you, young Juan Ros.
I neither confirm nor deny that rumor. But that year, Chariots of Fire won, and I was very upset. I go, Chariots of Fire? Come on, it's one of these other movies should have won. But anyway, it becomes
kind of like our younger son Graham, who's 9, and he voted anything that The Hobbit was nominated for
because he wanted to win.
He wanted that to win,
right?
Yeah,
right.
And it's much different now because there's so much media coverage of the Oscars, and there are so many awards leading up to the Oscars. There's all the Critics Awards. There are numerous Guild Awards. Then you have the Golden Globes and the SAG Awards. So by the time the Oscars roll around, you have a pretty good indication of the major categories. If someone has won very consistently, you'd kind of know who was likely to win the Oscars. And that wasn't the case back in the 70s and 80s, where it was really more of a little bit more of a guessing game. And there's a lot more opportunities for surprises than there are, I think, today in the Oscars.
You mentioned social networking. I noticed on the Oscar webpage that they have how many mentions the different actors have gotten on social networking.
Really?
Leonardo DiCaprio, as of about half an hour ago, was leading with 123,733 social mentions, followed by Jennifer Lawrence at 81,890, Jared Leto at 78,964. That's in the thousands, my friends.
Wow.
And Lupita Nyong'o, is that how you say that?
Nyong'o, Best Supporting Actress winner.
Best Supporting Actress, yeah. She's
in fourth place with social mentions, 77,758. And then fifth is Matthew McConaughey with 62,767.
Isn't that fascinating?
Well, social media has really taken over, and Ellen DeGeneres used it to an amazing advantage. In the middle of the ceremony last night, she took a selfie with all these actors. And
I did see that.
Actors,
I mean, it was Brad Pitt and Bradley Cooper.
Well, it started with Meryl Streep.
It started with Meryl Streep.
And Julia Roberts, who was behind
suddenly
her.
all these actors who were close to the aisle just kind of jumped out of their seats to take this selfie. It seemed very improvised. It was very cool.
And it was cute because you could kind of see them as real human beings.
Kind of brought them down to earth a little bit.
Like all of us jumping in with our selfies with our friends. I mean, it was really fun.
And it became the most retweeted photo on record. It got retweeted so fast, it crashed Twitter. She came back on the air and actually said that the retweets crashed Twitter. And it's a very cool picture if you look it up. And it's just
actually, I have seen that, even though I didn't see the broadcast. I saw that picture on, I think it was Yahoo, on their front page. So that did make it into my awareness. And somebody told me once that celebrities love taking pictures with each other. A friend of mine who has celebrities as friends said she just marvels at how when they meet each other, they don't treat each other just like, oh yeah, we're in the club, we don't have to take pictures of each other. It's more like, hey, look who I am taking a picture with. So they do selfies all the time when they're not social networking anyway.
You know who I'd like to take a selfie with? Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Wouldn't that be cool?
Okay, that was
How can I make that happen?
Way to bring it back to unity. Well done.
Well, I was just thinking, how cool would that be if you could do selfies with, some of your favorite people who have since passed.
And here I thought she was going to say Colin Firth, so...
Well, maybe him too.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for John Cusack.
Or Henry Cavill.
Oh, Henry Cavill.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's more recent. Love.
That's right. So love was definitely a theme through some of the movies. So, and I want to come back because you mentioned as far as Oscar parties and who wins the pool goes, it's these small unknown categories. But one was this documentary short called The Lady in Number 6, Music Saved My Life.
Yes.
About a woman who had been in the Holocaust, and the only way that she survived and got out was by playing the piano.
That's right. Her name was Alice Hers Sommer, and she was, up until a week ago, the world's oldest Holocaust survivor. And it was... I haven't seen the documentary, but from what I've read, it was just a very uplifting story about she plays the piano, and music basically saved her life through the Holocaust and got her through it. And even to the very ripe old age of 110, and she passed away at 110.
Exactly a week
before the Oscar ceremony. She was still very optimistic.
She wanted better seats, I think, for the Oscar ceremony. I wanted to interject here that I have seen parts of that documentary, I think, because BBC did a story on her and her passing, and they showed bits of what I assume was the documentary, interviews with her about how music really made a difference in her life and gave her hope and filled her with joy when things were difficult. So... I may not have seen the Oscars, but I saw some of that.
And those documentary categories actually are, it's too bad that they don't get much more popularity amongst casual Oscar goers. They kind of get short shrift.
Them? Because this is something I would love to see. And even the documentary feature, 20 Feet from Stardom, that one, I mean, these are... short film, real people, documentaries, right? So how do we get to see these? I mean, how would anyone see these?
Well, thank goodness now we have things like Netflix and, Amazon Instant Video and that sort of thing. They're generally, I don't know if they'll go out on limited release. I mean, I think in the Los Angeles area you can probably see at least the features, but the documentary shorts are generally just screened for the Academy members, and you just have to kind of root around and find how you can view them. But I would imagine that now with the proliferation of streaming video, that you should be able to find them online somewhere, so that you can get to enjoy them as well.
Because one of the uplifting ones was this documentary feature, 20 Feet from Stardom, right?
That's right.
Because it seems like all the others were, again, going back to survival, kind of a survival theme. But with this one...
Yeah, 20 Feet from Stardom. It's about some backup singers.
Right.
And it's their story. And one of them is Judith Hill, who was featured on The Voice. And, she sang backup to Michael Jackson. And apparently a great little film about the lives of background singers,
Wow.
and we don't know much about them, but here they are highlighted, and now they're in the foreground. And one of them came up on stage with the makers of the film, and she sang extemporaneously. That's part of her speech. It was remarkable. So these documentaries.
Wow.
There was some controversy a few years back where the Academy was considering dropping the documentary award presentations from the telecast and pushing those off to a non-telecast some kind of event, like those technical awards or whatever. And there was a lot of brouhaha in the documentary film community, and they prevailed. And as of now, it's still part of the telecast, and I think it adds to a lot of the variety of the awards show.
Well, because it also reminds us that there's great stories. Again, there's great stories within our own lives that we're all living these wonderful stories. And if we can capture some of the ones that are really extraordinary and share that with the world, that it can spread really positive messages and deep lessons for all of us.
Filmmaking is all about storytelling. I mean, that's really all it is. It's stories in pictures and dialogue. And whether it's a fictional film that's completely original, or a fictional film that's based on a true story, or a documentary, which is reality, it's all about the power of the story. And so the ones that rise up to the level of Academy Awards and Oscar nominations and wins are those that just tell their story in the best way possible. And it gets there's this visceral appeal to that. It calls you forth to think about, what is this story about? What are the themes here? And subconsciously, you're kind of processing all of that. At least I do when watching movies. It becomes it can be a very powerful cathartic experience, or it could just be about laughing or about crying or any of those sorts of reactions.
But even those are human experiences
Absolutely.
too.
Right. Well, and that's one of the functions of myth that Joseph Campbell talks about, is it is kind of giving us a template for us to base our own lives on, or maybe see how other people have handled separate or similar situations. And the idea of collective dreaming, like Jung was talking about, films give us a way to do collective dreaming. And so all of our imaginations are kind of in sync when a lot of us see a film, and we use that as the language of our imaginations and our pop culture and subtext. When we're joking with each other, we use lines from movies. I know Juan and I do, and my brother and I do. And I remember Stacy observing a conversation with my brother and I, and noticing that we didn't seem to be saying anything but movie quotes back and forth to each other and cracking up. And Stacy had no idea what we were just talking about.
It's true. It's true.
Sometimes I don't know what either of you are talking about either, so that's okay.
We have to keep some mystery, between friends.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm looking at the list of the best animated features right now, and seeing, I don't know, was it Frozen who won this year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't know.
So I'm looking at...
it's been one of the best making animated films of all time.
It has made a lot of money, and it has sort of spread in its popularity, particularly with young girls.
Yes, yay!
There are YouTube videos galore of singing all of the songs, but particularly the song that won Best Original Song, Let It Go. You go online, you search for it, you'll see it all over the place. And by the way, little trivia note, which was mentioned last night on the Oscars, is that one of the co-writers of that song, Let It Go, his name is Robert Lopez. He got his EGOT last night. He has already won, which is when you win an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony Award, that's an EGOT, E-G-O-T.
Wow.
And he had already gotten 3 of those. He had gotten the EGT EGT, I guess you don't really call it that. And then he got it.
He's making stuff
I'm
up
just
now.
making that up. But he did have an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony already, and now he's got an Oscar. So he's in rare company. Rita Moreno is one who has an EGOT, and a couple others.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, I love that story. And we have more stories for you after this break. We are Pop Conscious, and we will be right back. Thanks for listening so far.
Stay tuned.
Thank you for tuning in for Pop Conscious. Here are your hosts, Malayna Dawn and Stacy Macris Ross.
Well, hello and welcome back. This is Stacy Macris Ross, and I'm with my friend and partner, Malayna Dawn, who's in the
Hello.
on the island Sri out there in Sri Lanka. And then my husband, Juan Ros, is our guest today.
Hello.
So my husband, Juan, again, graduated from Penn State with a degree in film and went on to work in movies, including Cape Fear, JFK, and Godfather 3. So we were talking Oscars today, and he actually worked on 2 of those movies that received some Oscar nominations, JFK and Godfather 3.
This is correct. JFK was nominated for multiple Oscars, and it was it was in for 1991, and it won 2 awards for cinematography and editing. So, yay, JFK.
Do you know who won for 1991 Best Picture won?
1991 was
quizzing
Silence
you.
of the Lambs.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my
you're
God,
right.
look, not even a pause. Not even a pause. in it.
And by the way,
Wow.
JFK is my 1 degree of separation from Kevin Bacon, who was also in the movie JFK.
Ah, very good. My Kevin Bacon connection is in the movie The Butcher's Wife. I was in it on screen, and then Demi Moore starred in that, and she was in what is that? It's some officer movie with Jack Nicholson. What is that called?
That would be a Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men.
Right. I was thinking You Can't Handle the Truth. Also, we remember that more than the title of the movie. So tell us more about your career, Juan. I want to hear more.
Yeah, so how did you get from being, again, Miami, New York, LA? Well, ultimately it was all about leading up to me. I know.
Yes, I was on a search for Stacy Macris Ross.
That's
from
right.
The time
It was
I
just
was,
Stacy Macris at the time.
Yes, I didn't know she would
And
be.
you thought you wanted to go into movies, but really it was to find your true love.
This is true.
Okay, so as far as the movie parts of that, though, how did you get?
I feel uncomfortable listening to this. Like I shouldn't be in on this conversation.
So how did you get from your time in New York and then LA and being an aspiring filmmaker, right, and screenplay?
How did I
writer?
get to there, or
Well,
how did I?
Well, how did that all evolve, and what's?
As I mentioned in an earlier segment, I've always liked movies, and when I was a senior in high school, my best friend Xavier Briggs we were talking about what we were going to study in college, and I told him I was really torn between wanting to study movies and something a little more practical like computer science. And he looked at me, he goes, "Why are you going to study computer science? That's not what you love. Study movies. Don't worry about it so much." And
That's a good friend right there.
Xavier Briggs,
Good
who
message.
is very successful, and we're still on Facebook friends and so forth. But I said, okay, fine. And then actually what I ended up doing is in my freshman year, I ended up taking both a computer sci class and film 101 class. I said, all right, I'm going to take them both and see what happens. I hated my computer sci class. I got a C on it. The only
Oh my gosh.
the only C I got through
Like
my
in your
entire
life.
college career.
Yeah.
And I got like a 99% on my film class. So that kind of sealed it for me. So after I graduated Penn State, I moved to New York. Actually, I moved back to Miami first to save up money to move to New York, and I worked in a nightclub, saved up money, then moved to New York. I was living with a woman on Staten Island who was letting me sleep on her couch. She was the stepsister of a woman that my sister was working with when she worked at a bank. And so it was this weird connection that got me actually in New York. And during the daytime, I would pound the pavement of Manhattan. There was another Penn State graduate who was working in the film business said, here's where you need to go. This is where the movies have their like production offices when they come to New York. These couple buildings, just go there every so often and just drop off resumes. And that's what I did for like a whole month. I would just go, I'd walk around, I'd drop off resumes. And I got a phone call one day. It said, hey, we need somebody to drive around New York. We're doing this PBS 1-hour film that starred Keanu Reeves and Sarah Jessica Parker
Oh, wow.
at the time. And I said, okay, I'll take it. and that was my very first job in quote unquote the business. And then from there, got other jobs and eventually lucked into a group of folks who were well established. I did some day work on the movie Goodfellas, and those people then just kept hiring me from movie to movie, and that's how I got into all these other bigger productions.
It's a Juan Ros survival story.
Yeah, I mean, it's just perseverance and persistence and hard work. And it's a grueling career if you're working in production. It's very tough. There's long hours. You're gone from your family. If you have a family, you're gone on location or whatever. But ultimately, and then you don't nearly know if the movie's going to be any good or not at the end of the day. So it becomes a lot of just diving into it, and that's your life for 3 months or however long the shoot is, and then you go on to your next job, and very gypsy-like.
Yeah, and we hear a lot of that kind of more the negative, pieces of Hollywood and the Hollywood industry, film, movie, TV. But here at Pop Conscious, we always try to find the good and the most positive. So what would you say, looking back, was the positive pieces, the spiritual pieces, the lessons that you've learned that really shaped you and made you the person that you are, or that you've been able to apply today?
Well, it gave me confidence, I think. I think I went into it not knowing what I was doing or if I was going to be good enough. And the fact that I kept getting hired and I kept getting liked by people who said, hey, you're doing a good job, let's bring you to the next production, that gave me a lot of confidence at a young age. It also taught me the power of hard work. I mean, I just basically did whatever was asked of me. And that's really when you're at the lower level, that's what you need to do. And eventually you rise up through the ranks. And I became a second assistant director. I joined the Directors Guild of America, which is the union for directors and assistant directors. And that was like a big leap for me. So, it's again, it goes to perseverance and hard work and those qualities that I think I already had in me from my parents. And particularly my father and grandfather, but those just kind of came out, and I made some lifelong friends and got to hang out with some very cool people. I mean, Martin Scorsese, these are my childhood idols, right. Francis Ford Coppola, Oliver Stone. Not all of them were the nicest people, especially on the set, but it's a very pressure-filled environment where decisions have to be made. There's money being spent, every second of a production, and you have to be very conscious of that. So, what also occurs to me is that from the good advice that your good friend gave you, Xavier Briggs, that not everybody even takes the time or thinks that they're allowed to choose a job or choose a career that they love. It's kind of like you have to get a job that will pay the bills, but it's possible. And especially in Unity, I think it's more prevalent that we start with the feeling, because it's heart-centered metaphysics in Unity. So we start with the feelings we have and follow our passion, and then get to work in our dream jobs. Right. And that's something I wish more people knew. When I see my friends and my godkids looking for jobs, and they don't seem to be connecting that with something that is a passion of theirs and something they love and something they would do anyway if nobody was paying them, like in their spare time. What is it that you're spending your time doing? Yes. Yeah, and you can still, and again, we went back to, economics of our time. And yeah, I think we could still be living our passions, even though we may, have to pay the bills. But if you're working towards that dream or that passion, and again, keeping that in your mind and your visualizations, and you're doing the work to get there. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is fear. I think especially in the film business, which is such a visual business, there's a lot of focus on youth and appearance and all of this. There's a great deal of fear in the business, I would say. Fear of getting old for actors. For people on the crew, it's fear of, am I going to have my next job? What is it going to be? It's freelance work if you're working in production. So you sometimes don't know what your next job's going to be. So there's just a lot of that going on. And I think if you can let go of that or not focus on that, I mean, it takes a lot of work, but that's what's going to get you through. And the example that I use is my good friend Dave, who I worked with in the movie business in New York. We drove out across the country together when we both moved to LA back in the early 90s. He still works in the movie business, and I find that he has probably the most integrity. He's got a moral compass. Anyone that I've ever met in the film business, it's just unbelievable. I mean, he doesn't take any guff. He loves what he does, but if there's egos or whatever, any kind of nonsense around him, he'll just be straight up and not say, I don't need this.
Yeah, just stands in his power and his
absolutely
integrity. Yes.
Yeah, and what I'm also hearing through this is you can't have a hero's journey if there is no struggle. If there is nothing to overcome, you can't become a hero. So that takes place whether you're pursuing your dream career or in the stories that are told in the movies. I mean, there are several layers. When you've done a production, I'm sure you found, and I've heard this from a lot of like the special features on DVDs, that the experience that the crew had while making the movie was a whole different story from what the story of the film is.
Oh, no doubt. It's you're there all day long and you're doing this work, and it's just completely different. And sometimes there's magic there, and sometimes it's just drudgery. But at the end of the day, if you look past all of that, and if you really enjoy what you're doing, and you have that attitude that this is my life's work and I'm contributing to entertainment and people's pleasure and telling a story, then I think that's what makes it all worth it.
Well, I think it's a lot like, I think it's a lot like the 1998 Best Picture winner, which was what, Juan?
Are you referring to Shakespeare in Love?
Yes, I am.
Oh my gosh.
Because Shakespeare was writing about passion that he felt, and it has echoed throughout time. Stacy, what was it you were going to say? Do you even remember now that I stepped all over what you were talking about?
I thought that was a brilliant way to bring in quizzing Juan on.
Oh my gosh!
I was trying to catch him off guard.
Like, how about the year 1970?
Oh, that's Patton. That's an easy one.
Oh,
okay.
Easy.
I was going to say that Juan has the same thing that this 2001 Best Picture winner had. Do you know what that is?
A Beautiful Mind?
That's right. And some people might consider that something like a 1999 Best Picture winner.
An American Beauty?
That's right. Are you sure you don't have this in front of you?
No, he does not. I can say he does not have it in front of him.
I'm staring at the microphone. That's all I'm doing.
Oh my gosh. So you're kind of a lot like the 1988 Best Picture winner.
I knew you were going there with Rain Man, yes. I had a feeling
Yay! Oh my gosh, this is so fun. I'm going to continue this off the air. But right now we have to wrap up our fun here at Pop. It was so quick. We're going to have Juan back maybe.
I know, I think so, because he's got more stories to tell.
We didn't even get to talk about the 1982 Best Picture, Gandhi.
Oh, and I interviewed Ben Kingsley.
Sir
That's
Ben?
his name, right? Yeah, and I was watching Hugo recently and saw him and went, hey, I interviewed him, because I never remember till I see them. Anyway, we're wrapping it up. Magic Mirror shout out to Margie.
Yes, Reverend Margie. She's like one of our biggest fans. She listens every week. So hello.
Yes. Grateful. And this show is brought to you in part by the Unity Church of Alhambra Foundation, a financial foundation ministry supporting the work of Unity in the Southwest region. We are Pop Conscious, and thank you for listening. See you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Conscious with Malayna Dawn and Stacy Macris Ross. Join us every Monday at 2 p.m. Central for more insights into how spirituality and pop culture connect in your life every day.